We are beautifully melanated.
And I'm here with my two lovely co-hosts.
Hi, I'm Karen.
Hi, I'm Kay. Welcome to this episode. Tonight, I'm going to start off with what in the world. So, trigger warning for the story I'm about to share, but it is relevant to our series on child development and parenting. But Karen, I just want to say to you, I don't know what you've done by last week talking about the NHS, because this week, maybe yesterday, Tory MP Sajid Javid says we need to pay £20 for a GP appointment and £66 to go to A&E.
Wow.
Is his proposal. He ain't saying nothing about giving us back our taxes. This is on top of taxing us.
We did say this last week, didn't we? This is what we talked about. See, we preempted this.
Yeah. So are you still for means testing? And
to be fair, I wasn't really for it. I'm just exploring different ideas.
Okay.
In which we can tackle something that clearly isn't working, you know?
Yeah, fair enough. Just want to put it out there, guys. It might happen. So, what's in the world? Trigger warning, rape, sexual violence, and murder. So, apologies in advance, but it feels really relevant. So, you may or may not have heard the story about a mom. I won't say her name, but she did a thing that a lot of parents do, which I find really frustrating, and bailed her son out when he was arrested for a very serious crime. And she actually went onto Facebook and posted, that she's calling on God to lift up her son. She declared and decreed that no weapon formed against him would prosper, that this allegation against him of rape of children and young women, she was saying it's not true. And she challenged all the mothers of young adult sons to repost this and pray. So she was absolutely not believing that her son was violent. Bailed him out, and he came home to her. And that was about 3 days after she bailed him, actually. And she said, he was with a friend, they talked, they laughed. And when the friend left, her ex-son lured her to her bathroom, beat her with his fist, saying he was going to kill her. She said he almost did. And then he violently raped her, his mum. And she said she's sharing it because she knows that none of this was, I think she's saying, her fault. She trusted that her son would never do that to her or anyone. She's in hospital because he really did beat her to near death. And she's saying now he's been arrested and he's her ex-son, and she hopes he spends the rest of his life in prison. Ladies, as a mother, if your child is accused of a violent crime, what are your steps? What are you thinking?
Okay, so my guess is that he possibly displayed behaviors which would suggest he had mental health difficulties way before this. That's my guess. And I'm saying that because it's so extreme that I wonder, what mum saw leading up to this. That would be my first thought, okay? So I'm guessing then that his mental health difficulties were left unsupported. And as you said, I think mum prayed about it. You're on mute, Kay.
Just wanted to say there's no record of mental health difficulties. Possibly trauma or even undiagnosed, but there is no record of it in the report.
I guess what I'm saying is that just because there's no record of it being reported doesn't mean he wasn't experiencing difficulties, right? So what leads a child to carry out such acts of extreme violence? Because what you've described is extreme, isn't it? Rape of your mother is, that's highly violent and highly extreme. So I wonder how he had presented prior to that. Were there little things he was doing? Was he, what you said earlier about her praying made me think, had it gone unnoticed or unchallenged because of the way that mum dealt with it, perhaps? And I'm just throwing it out there, I don't know. And I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? Is that if, say, for example, mum had seen some things that were alarming, that were concerning, and nothing was done, that could have snowballed and, ended up where this young man is, has become a violent predator. I mean, it's awful what's happened. So your question is, as a mother, if I heard that my child, or it was alleged or reported that my child had done, committed some of these crimes, how would I have dealt with it? So what I'm saying is, I don't know, like, I'd like to think I would want to know, I would challenge it, wouldn't I? I would ask questions. I would, speak to, I don't know, police, whoever the allegation came from. I'd want to sit down with my child, find out what's going on. And yeah, if it's more than one crime, isn't it? It's like you said, multiple.
Yes, so there was stabbing with intent to wound. There was a carjacking previously. There was the rape of the 13-year-old.
It can't all be
he
one,
had he had a rap sheet.
Right. So
he isn't innocent.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So mum must have known each time something happened. Right. So how old was the boy? How old is he?
Let's see if his age is posted here. I haven't seen his age. Let me keep looking.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, he's a minor, right?
Yeah. He's not a minor. He's an adult.
Okay, so he's an adult. All right. Okay, so she's got like a...
He's 26.
Okay, so he's an adult, and you've heard that your son has committed these atrocities, right? Well, mum must have known because he's got a rap sheet. So what did she do the first time? Obviously, it went unchallenged. She doesn't believe her son would be guilty of that. Something happens again. And that's the problem, isn't it? Sort of not dealing with things head on, just pretending that he hasn't done it. And I can imagine that must be so painful to come to the realization that your son could be capable of these sort of crimes. That must have been very, very hard for her, very, very painful, very difficult for her to admit to and come to terms with. However, he was doing it. So I think she failed him, really, because A, possibly needed help, and B, had there been some sort of, I don't know, what did the authorities do about it anyway? Like, so had he been convicted of any of these crimes?
He was arrested for the rape of a woman, and for a child at knife point. Look, the kid was problematic. She bailed him, so he was clearly being held on bail, or at least in remand. She bailed him out.
But was he not convicted of any of those things? There was no conviction?
Doesn't sound like it, no. Oh, no, he's 30 now. Ooh, this year he turned 30. This is a grown man, 30.
But there were no convictions. See, that surprises me as well, that there was, that he could be accused of these things. Did they go to court? That's the thing. Without the context, it's really difficult. And I'm not saying that mum should have done something about it, but I guess if nothing came of it, I guess she was holding on to that, saying, my son's guilty, he hasn't been prosecuted, nothing's come of it.
That's why I said accusation. If your child was accused, would you have bailed your child out knowing, like you said, she raised this man? I can't believe he's just suddenly up and decided to commit these heinous crimes. She
No,
would have
that's what I'm
seen the
saying.
problem
She would have.
before.
That's what I'm saying. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But even going by the accusation alone, would you have bailed your child out? It's quite a serious crime.
The thing is, though, that woman doesn't think he did it. That's the problem. She doesn't believe that she could have a son who would commit those things. Do you see what I'm saying? So from her point of view, she's saying, surely not. You know, my son wouldn't do that. She's obviously buried her head.
Many women
Yeah,
do.
absolutely, 100%, absolutely.
I've spoke to many women about this kind of thing. They do not believe.
Really?
Is capable. I think if they've been charged with something, that's different. But I think I don't know to be honest, I don't know how I'd react if I had a son and he was accused of this. I think I'd want to know more. The thing that I know about this story that I feel a bit odd, doesn't sit right with me, is her going to God kind of thing. That troubles me. In times
what way?
of extreme stress. I think because I feel like she's using this whole God thing as either something happens that we don't know about. Well, it must have. For him to commit such extreme behaviour, and he actually did rape his mother. So that makes me think, because we know he did for a fact rape his mother.
Yes.
That makes me think that the other 2 rapes or the other alleged stuff probably was correct. Because you can't just go from, nothing to raping your mother and beating her up. It seems... I wonder if he wanted to destroy her. I wonder if it wasn't even a sexual thing. I wonder, sometimes how it can be a power thing. I wonder if it's something about destruction of women, destruction of the mother. I don't know. But I think she was too busy looking at God because she got lost in all that, sounds like. All the while her son was getting up to stuff. He must have been. He's acted so horrifically. I don't know. I just feel, in my experience of knowing people in life that have acted pretty badly, in fact, not as badly as that, but badly, there's always been something leading up to it. Always.
Yeah.
So I would say he probably did rape the 13-year-old and hold to knife point, and he probably did do the other crimes that Kay talked about, because the fact, if he can beat and rape his own mother, then God knows what this man is capable of. So I don't really know what I'd have done, but I refuse to believe there was no pointers, no red flags. Come on. Come on. No?
Yeah, there must have been.
She must be. That's what I'm saying. She was probably too delusional and thinking about God all the time because she didn't want to think about her son. Stop looking at God and start looking at your son. That's
exactly.
2 pence.
But ladies, we say that, but I guess for some people who do have a faith and they are firm believers in their faith, I do get that, because what I imagine she was doing is praying and hoping that, rather like how you guys might put things out there into the universe, yeah? You may not say you are praying.
I'm still a realist, Karen. I'm still a realist. I'm up as the universe, but if Naya was acting wild, I'm still going to know Naya's acting wild. It wasn't the whole stargazing and everything.
But what you said was important. You said until he raped his mother and beat her up,
he didn't believe it.
They were allegations, though. Do you understand? Yeah. So there was nothing.
I keep reading the story, Karen, and it says he has been in and out of prison. So he's been in and out of prison. He's done his time. He's come out. He committed another crime. He's back in prison. He come out.
Been convicted then of crimes.
That's different, because now you're saying that he has been convicted. Before we didn't know that.
Yeah. Okay. So if he's been convicted of many crimes, I would not feel comfortable with my son coming back to my house.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And like you said, Sarah, I mean, it's very Freudian if you think about it.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Destruction of the mother.
Yeah, destruction of the mother through penetration. But for me, if it's a child, it's a child. That's what got me. If my son, and I do have a son, was accused of raping a child, I don't think he would. I know my son. But I couldn't just say, I'm going to pray and ask God to form weapons against the girl who's Really? You were the weapon formed against your own son at this point.
And
He's
also
been in and
pushing
out of
other
prison.
women. Pushing,
Exactly.
oh, please ask other women to post it. It's very outwardly, isn't it?
Other mothers post
Yeah,
it.
it's
And
kind of outwardly not looking at the self again.
Yeah. But it's an allegation. So at this time it was, he's been in and out of prison for heinous crimes, rape, kidnapping, robbery.
Oh, great.
Exactly.
There's some mothers, though, that will take and I mean, I know one mother I'd love to highlight on this podcast, but I will not. One mother that would happily take her son back after just a couple of those two things.
Really?
Yep.
Nah.
Anyway, we're not going to go there, Kay. You know them. One particular mother who would happily take her son back after that. So,
And I don't understand that mentality.
But the thing is, hold on a minute. So what are you saying then? Are you saying that you would disown your son because he committed an awful crime? And please don't think I'm not agreeing with you. The crime is absolutely heinous. But are you saying that what would you do then? Are you saying that you would disown your child?
No, but he's doing the time. He's going to go on trial and he's going to do the time.
But bail doesn't mean he wouldn't have. She's not in charge of the justice system. She bailed him out, but it's for the system, for the courts, isn't it? To try him and convict him. She didn't.
But if she hadn't bailed him, he'd have been sat there on remand waiting for trial. She bailed him knowing his history.
Hang on a minute. So now you're saying that because she bailed him, she then allowed another crime to happen. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, except this time it happened to her. And now she believes it. Now she believes it and calling her ex-son. So he wasn't her ex-son when he was beating up women, taking them at gunpoint, raping women and children. Now he's your ex-son because it happened to you?
I think that's what he did to her. Well, what he did to everyone is absolutely heinous. I'm saying, but doing that to her is on a completely another level.
Oh, that is just like, I renounce you even coming out of my womb.
Yeah,
exactly.
I never had you. You didn't exist.
Yeah, I mean that's on another level altogether.
If that is to me, that's like I don't have a son anymore. That kind of stuff is like I don't want to ever see you again the rest of my life. It's disgusting.
Yeah. She's not the only mother who does that, believe it or not, this week. Again, but this is a different family. This guy, I'm not even saying his name, he's a mass murderer. He killed his wife, his mother-in-law, his 5 children, and then himself. And his family, including his mother, this is what they said about him. This is his obituary. He made it a point to spend quality time with each and every one of his children. The children he just killed. He enjoyed making memories with the family. You know, she mentioned his wife, that they were married in 2003 and welcomed 5 children into their family. All of the children were truly a cherished miracle to them. He goes on to say he enjoyed a life of service, including serving in the church, and on a mission in Brazil for the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. He coached his school's kids' sport teams.
The dodgy church? That's a dodgy church, isn't it?
Absolutely. Doing home improvement, blah, blah. This man has just killed 7 people. How are you going to write an obituary? What obituary could I give my son if he had killed 7 people? That wouldn't be it. I don't understand mothers who I have to say, I know it exists. I know there are mothers who would literally wash the blood out of their child's clothes.
Yep. That's right.
When they committed murder. I'm not one of them mothers. No.
Not me.
You're going to do the time. You committed the crime. You thought you was bad. Well, carry on then. But we need to stop doing this because she would have known she raised a child who was troubled and problematic, even if there are mental health issues there. How did it get to this point?
I think as I said, I think she was too busy looking at God. And that's not it's the way you first said it, Kay, when you first talked about the article, you know, share this. And it's just, I understand people go to God for comfort, but I feel that at this time, she was too distracted. It seems that way. I don't know.
I think that there's obviously a lot more to this than we realize.
Yeah.
Because for him to commit that, the nature of that crime on his mum is
Other things would happen before, wouldn't they,
right?
Karen? Other things would have happened before.
Other things would have happened. Possibly there's some guilt in there. Maybe there's some things that she did.
Right,
as a
yes.
mother, I think
Yep.
maybe she is feeling guilty and therefore felt as if she had to give more, do more, because she is racked herself with guilt. Possibly she has her own mental health
Yes,
difficulties.
exactly. Yeah.
Honestly, this is we're just taking a snippet out, aren't we? And I think there are layers and layers and layers to this. What I would say though is that I do know parents whose children have committed crime. Could be gun crime or, sort of gang-related difficulties, crimes. And I think that there are parents who, in the heat of the moment, would protect their child if they could.
I think that's different, though. Right. I've known a lot of people that have had, situation with their sons, or I've known people that have committed crimes, gang-related crime. But it's just like, that's different. I feel like if your son gets caught up in a gang and manages to try and gets out of that gang, you are going to support him. Not you say you, I would.
Yeah, but what if he's still in the gang? What if he's still in the gang and he?
Okay, I wouldn't support him, but if he started battering someone or raping someone, that's something that's different than holding up a liquor store or something. I don't know. I just think it's not. It's different for me.
For me, if you go down that path, you're on your own.
See, that's
the only time I would bail my son out if it was self-defense and he had to take someone out in self-defense, then I'm on his side. But if he wants to be in a gang, run the street, be a roadman, no, you are on your own.
Yeah, I think the problem is you don't want all that stuff being brought back to your house.
I don't.
No,
I need to sleep. I can't take that anxiety.
No.
But also, all right, actually, there's a couple of things I need to address here. So Sarah's saying it depends on the crime. That's interesting, because now we're separating out different crimes, because that means that we're saying that some crimes are worse than others. I guess they are, but it's interesting to hear what Sarah thinks is a crime that you couldn't forgive and which ones you can. And also, Kay, you're saying that if your child took that path at all, that's a complete, no-go.
Yeah.
Do you not think, though, you can say that now, but it would strongly depend on, it actually happening to you before you could actually say that? Do you not think that?
No. I know myself.
You categorically sit there and say whatever, any sort of crime at all, you'd wash your hands, would you?
Yes. I'm for justice. And if I want that for myself, then I have to want it for other people. And if he chooses a life of crime, it doesn't really matter the backstory or the whys.
Oh, that's
if
interesting.
You choose this life, then you are on your own. You're not bringing no bin bag with bloodied clothes and knife to my house. You would be mad. I'd be turning you in myself. No.
That's really interesting. And I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm just listening, because I would love members of the public to comment on that. I'd like to know if our love is completely unconditional for our children. What lengths would we go to? And I couldn't categorically say that I wouldn't try and save my child. I'm not saying that, if they killed someone, I wouldn't, because obviously that's somebody else who's lost their child, haven't they? Right. So I've got to consider all that. But I don't know. I think I'm with Sarah. I think it depends on the crime. I can't say categorically any crime, that's it. I'm washing my hands. I don't think I could say that. And
that's what I said. My exception is self-defense.
Yeah, I don't know. This is interesting. I don't know. I couldn't say that. I think it just depends. Pardon?
Yeah, you wouldn't say categorically.
No,
your child is on their own. If he is in prison for a crime, or she, because they committed it premeditated, or they chose a certain lifestyle that landed them there, I'm not saying I wouldn't visit them in prison. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I'm not going to be the mother you can come to and expect me to help you to hide the crime or help you to get out of prison. No, you did it. You're going to do the time. And then you're going to come out and hopefully reform yourself.
What if he was coerced?
No, coerced. Yeah, I suppose there can be an element when there is a gang-related activity. There is a level of coercion, but I would hope that that's not something he would even consider in the first place because of how I raised him.
But we all would. Every mother would like to say that. Every mother would like to. I mean, look at gang-related crimes in London. There was a period of time I couldn't put the news on without hearing that somebody got shot or stabbed. It was constant at one point.
I agree.
But every parent would like to think that they didn't raise their son, their daughter to do that. Everyone would like to think that. But we know that there are so many reasons. Or I'm not excusing the behavior, but what I'm saying is, I think there's so many layers to it. You've got parents who have been present but absent, possibly to no fault of their own because they're working. The environment, you might live in just in an area where gang-related crimes are rife. You could live in an area where, I don't know, it could be anything, couldn't it? So every mother, I'm sure, would like to say, I'm so shocked. I didn't raise him like that. I did my best, da-da-da. But your son comes home and he's covered in blood, let's just say.
Yeah. Whose blood?
Yeah, of course you're going to ask all that. You're going to ask. And I'm not saying that I would, condone that. Absolutely not. But in the heat of the moment, would I want to help my son? Would I want to try and get... And the other thing is, it's not that I would necessarily want to get him off of it, but what if I thought, actually, he may not receive a fair trial because of his colour? What if I thought that it's likely that he would be treated more harshly because of the colour of his skin? Would I try to help him then? Do you see what I'm saying? They're just layers to this, I think.
They are, and I hear that, and they would be treated. Black boys, black men, black women, we're all treated much more harshly than their white counterparts. But also, shouldn't that be something he took into account before he started to go down that path, knowing fully well we're in a hostile country?
Do young people caught up in gangs have the emotional maturity to stop and go, should I be doing this? Possibly not, Kay.
Possibly not.
Possibly not.
I suppose I'm thinking of my son at his age now. He's mid-20s.
Yeah, he's old.
But as a teenager, your brain isn't developed enough anyway to make full adult decisions. And that's when they tend to get into groomed.
Absolutely.
What I'm saying is our community particularly has a really nasty habit of hiding the criminals. And then we wonder why the crime doesn't end.
I agree. Look, I hear you. I agree because somebody, your gain in this situation, somebody else has lost, isn't it? So somebody else has lost their child. Somebody else has lost,
Yeah.
So I agree. I'm not for 1 minute saying that it's behavior I condone. I'm just saying I think it's a lot more complicated. And I could not sit here and say to you, yeah, I'd turn my son in straight away. I couldn't say that because I just
would.
don't know.
I would turn him in.
I think eventually I would. If I knew he'd done it and, somebody else had lost their life or something like that, then yes. Because like I say, it's just wrong on every level, isn't it? But would be really hard. And, that would be something you'd have to.
It would break my heart.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
It would break your heart. It would really break your heart.
It really would break my heart.
Yeah,
and we would all suffer. But just to add to your point, Karen, yes, we do love our children conditionally. If we're really honest with ourselves, we love them conditionally. And we were loved conditionally. It's what Rogers talks about in his person-centered theory. The conditions of worth. From a very, very early age what pleases your parents. So you do it to get their approval. But the minute you do something that doesn't please them and you can see the displeasure and the disappointment, that's when you realize that you are loved conditionally, not unconditionally.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. I can't imagine anything I could do, but this is me. And I don't intend to commit lots of crime, okay?
I hope not.
I can't imagine anything I could do that would make my mum not love me. Because I think that even if she was displeased, she was dissatisfied, she was hurt, she was upset, all those things, I don't think it would change her love. I'd have to, I think I need
But Karen, you're a good girl. You're a good woman. What if you were on streets, drugged out of your mind, prostituting herself for a hit?
She wouldn't, but that wouldn't make her not love me. That wouldn't make my mum not love me.
Okay.
I think I think my mum would come out with food and clothes and a blanket. Yeah. I think
and take you home.
Yeah, she would. I think be the kind of
I
mum
agree, Karen. I agree. My dad would do the same.
Yeah,
my dad would do the same.
Me up,
my dad would do the same. He would come out with a blanket and come and get me.
Yeah, my mum would do that. And so it's hard for me to say that. And I think I'm the same with my children, that no matter what they do, I'd like to think that my love is unconditional, because I think it's the one love that doesn't have conditions to it. I'm not saying you don't change your behavior towards your child. For example, I might have a child who, say, for example, somebody's child takes drugs, right? They're on drugs. They would steal from you every time you forgive them. They come back, they steal again, rob you blind of everything, right? Mm-hmm. But I think these people, these mothers, allow them to come back because they're just so hopeful that one day that child will change, that you can love them enough for them to change. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that is the love of a parent, I would say. And I'll even go as far as to say I think that's the love of a mother. I can't speak for a man, I don't know. But anyway.
So then was this mother loving her son?
Say that again?
Was she loving her son unconditionally when she bailed him out for committing hideous crimes?
She thought she was. I believe that she thought that she was. And I'm not saying, and sometimes our love can be detrimental to our children. Because our love can actually stop our children from learning really, really important, valuable lessons that they need for life.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I feel like consequences is not something I should ever rescue my child from. How else do they learn?
I agree. All
right. Well, I would like you, Karen. I would love to hear from our listeners. What would you do?
Yeah. What would you do? Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So please email us. Drop us a line and let us know your thoughts. Anyway, that brings us onto this week's topic. So I would like to talk about adolescent mental health. So we are continuing the children's mental health series. And this week, like I say, we're talking about common mental health difficulties or emotional well-being difficulties experienced by teenagers and adolescents. So I work in a secondary school, and I would say the most common mental health or emotional well-being difficulty experienced by the children I work with is anxiety. Anxiety is huge. It's massive. And I think school itself is quite an anxiety-inducing environment to a lot of students. So I guess that's why I see so much of this. So the first thing I would explain to young people is that anxiety is completely normal. Everybody experiences anxiety, all right? It's not, that they're not alone. Everybody experiences anxiety, and it's healthy. Anxiety can be a motivator, and it keeps us out of danger. However, when anxiety becomes debilitating, so it stops you from doing things, it stops you from sort of carrying out day-to-day tasks, carrying out, things that you need day-to-day, that's when it becomes a problem. And I think lots of young people don't know the difference, right? So I hear lots of young people saying, I've got anxiety. I can't possibly have got anxiety. And very few people are actually diagnosed with anxiety. I would say most of it is just low-level stuff. And so that brings me to want to talk about resilience. I think a lot of our young people these days are just not resilient. They don't have something that says, okay, this is difficult. However, I'm going to push through and things will get better. I think for a lot of people, they really struggle to see that actually there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So for example, exam stress. Lots of students become so anxious, so worried about exams. And we repeatedly try and explain to them that, yes, it is anxiety provoking. We get that, but it's not the be and end all. If you don't get the GCSEs, you don't have to get straight 9s. They've changed the grading systems, haven't they, for anyone who doesn't know this? So the grades are now 1 being the lowest to 9 being the highest. It's replaced the A, B, C grades. So lots of students really worry, if I don't get, top marks, I won't then go on to university, I won't get a job. So they worry about things like that. I mean, I've even heard of students worrying about things like going to the shops. So the amount of times my daughter said to me, I've had to go to the shops for my friends to ask for things because they're so anxious, they can't talk to people. I think to myself, what? This is crazy. Why can't you talk to someone in a shop? But I guess lockdown hasn't helped. There's been a lot of difficulties with lockdown. I think a lot of young people really struggled through that period and to come back out. They're not used to talking to people so much because they're online. Their phones are everything. And I think there's lots and lots of reasons. But yeah, so the first thing is anxiety. The second thing that I face a lot in my job is self-harm. Now, self-harm is really, really common. Self-harm, unfortunately, has become a sort of coping mechanism, actually, for lots of young people, which is really worrying because while lots of young people can manage it, maintain it, and it's, the wounds are not necessarily deep, they can be quite superficial, it can just take an accident. It can just take something quite small for something quite serious to happen. So for those of you who are not familiar with self-harm, it's the act of deliberately hurting oneself. And like I say, lots and lots of young people have taken to this as a way of sort of self-soothing or managing difficulties with stress and anxiety. So I've come into contact with a lot of parents who've experienced this. And at first, it's so difficult to say to a parent, because obviously I have to make that phone call. If I've found out that a child has self-harmed, I have to call home and I have to have this conversation with parents. And it can be incredibly difficult because that's the last thing a parent wants to hear, that their child has deliberately hurt themselves. That's really, really hard to hear and really alarming, because it sounds a lot worse than sometimes it actually is. So then I have to talk to parents about why the child might be doing that. And there are lots and lots of different reasons why young people use self-harm. And then we think about ways in which they can swap self-harm for a healthier coping strategy. So that's kind of, the bulk of my work. I do a lot of work around managing those kind of behaviors. And I just wanted to ask you ladies why you think children, or if you think that children do lack resilience, and what you think the reasons for this is. My thoughts are that I think that we haven't really equipped our children really to cope with day-to-day stresses. And the problem, I think, is moving forward as they go into adulthood. I think that it's really hard for them to learn how to cope, and therefore, because the thing is, as an adult, you're going to have lots and lots of difficulties. There are going to be lots and lots of problems you're going to face, right? So I think trying to help our children manage now, I think will prevent a lot of difficulties later on in adult life. So ladies, do you agree when I say that, lots of young people lack resilience?
Yes, I do, Karen. I do think lots of young people lack resilience. And I think I think some of it is what, it starts at home with kind of parents teaching them about, you know, basically growing a backbone. Because there are people, unfortunately, adults I've met that were those anxious children and now struggle to go to the shops or struggle to, go and, I don't know, go and get a coffee and stuff. And you can't live like that. You just can't live like that. So I think it's really important, like you said, Karen, for us to kind of teach our young people about resilience, and also in our work, just kind of let them know, this, like, I don't know, an example, I'm trying to think of somebody, had a young person once that years ago that said they were worried about what their friend's boyfriend thought about their fashion sense, stuff like that. And that gave them debilitating anxiety. That you can't go through life worrying about what your friend's boyfriend thinks of you. That's not, you can't live like that. So I think it's about a kind of reality check as well with our young people about, just helping them live, really. This is nothing compared to what's going to happen in life. What your boyfriend's friend thinks of you is absolutely irrelevant, really.
The thing is, it's funny you say that, because I actually have worked with young people who have worried about things like that. And it sounds ridiculous to us, but you've got to remember it's relative, isn't it? So this young person doesn't have bills to pay. They don't have children. They are adolescents, aren't they? They're at school. And so for them, something that is really anxiety provoking might seem really trivial to us. But to this person, it isn't. For example, I've heard of young people taking overdoses, for example, because their boyfriend's broken up with them.
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely.
That's really common as well. And the thing is, to a young person, I guess in that moment, it feels like the end of the world.
Yes.
Because they really cared about this boy. You have to remember social media plays a huge part in this as well.
But I also think, Karen, it's the person. I think there are people that I have met in my life, and it's not even just with work, in life, that have had a really the toughest start we can somehow get our head around. And they have got grit, and they do not give up. And yes, they've had bumps along the road, but they're bloody determined, and they're refusing to let life get them down. And then you'll have people that have not had such tough times who want to end it all. Like it's, I think some people either are kind of have that grit or they don't. And that's a conversation I had with somebody a while back. They just, some people, I think often you'll look at the family and mum or whoever's the caregiver often is not that resilient, to put it that way. And then the children might not be very resilient. But then again, you can flip it that way. And then you can have a child that comes out of that kind of really tough family who's really resilient. So it's just complex. It's complex. But I think what's so important is for us to tell our young people about life and not scaring them about stuff to do with life, but just giving them the tools that they need so they don't feel the need to, I don't know, to try and destroy themselves. And there's also, I think it's important that people understand that self-harm is not just cutting. There's many different forms of self-harm out there, such as drinking too much, sleeping with lots of people and having loads of unprotected sex. There's issues with eating. So there's different ways that you can hurt oneself that we need to be aware of. But yeah, that's my views on it.
So I'm going to go back to the beginning. Back to attachment. Back to those first 1001 days. Because we're not talking about a situational anxiety that's come from experiencing something really difficult, where you might, the child or the young person might think, I didn't think I'd survive this, okay? What about those children who have anxious attachments to their caregivers? It starts there for them, that anxiety. It starts from birth, where the parenting is inconsistent, where the parents have not met their emotional needs, that allows them to have a secure attachment, as we spoke about in the first episode of the series, where the child is taught that his or her emotional needs may be met, may not be met. And it makes for an anxious child. And then, of course, you have those parents who use their children as emotional, for want of a better word, they need something from their children. So instead of giving their children safety and security, they need something from the child. So a child might grow up seeing their parents cry, as Sarah was saying, cry a lot, be distressed a lot, doesn't seem to be able to regulate themselves. And then the child becomes, the role reverses, and the child is they come and give mom a hug, come and, that will help mommy a lot, that will help dad a lot. And the child ends up never, ever having their own needs met. So that anxiety will go into school with them. And so whenever difficulties happen, of course, they think they can't cope because resilience was not modeled. Resilience being the ability to overcome difficult situations. They don't have enough of a secure base to know that when something difficult happens, they can overcome it. There is no security there. So I'm going to separate the two out. If a child has had an anxious attachment to their parent, that child will not, of their own accord, be able to mediate and regulate their anxiety in the way that a child with a secure attachment would. So they're going to need some help. And that's where we come in. Now, if that child harms because they're feeling overwhelmed, again, some children have to go to some really, really painful, distressing experiences, which no child should have to go through. Children who are neglected, sexually abused, emotionally abused, physically abused, whilst they're developing, how on earth can they regulate their anxiety? They live in constant fear. So those children, some, yes, will develop a resilience because there's something in them that says, this isn't okay. And some, it will destroy them and their sense of themselves. So I want to separate the two out. Self-harm, as Sarah said, can be so many different things. It can be pulling your hair, picking at your skin, inappropriate sexual behaviors, risk taking, where you might be harmed. And what that does, if they're feeling overwhelmed, particularly if they cut, if cutting is their form of regulation, it's because in that moment, they're no longer thinking about their problems. They're attending to the bleed, to the physical. So it shifts the pressure from a mental one to a physical one. So watching the blood flow might be quite relaxing. And I can breathe again. And that heals up, and then I'll cut again next time as a way of managing distress and overwhelm. I do think that that's different to the trend, because sometimes it is a trend of saying you're self-harming or you're anxious beyond what you can manage. Yes, sometimes it is a trend, and you can tell for those whom it is. But it goes back to the family unit. It absolutely goes back to the family, why this generation might not feel as resilient as we were. And I don't know what the difference in parenting styles is. Maybe the pendulum has swung where we were, I wouldn't say our upbringing, speak for myself, was necessarily without anxiety-provoking situations. We were beaten. And that beating could be quite brutal sometimes. So I'm not saying we had it better than this generation, but it does feel like there is something lacking. Then we have ourselves to blame because we are the parents of this generation. What have we gotten wrong? What have we missed?
That is a good question. That's something I think about a lot because, like you say, we grew up. I just think it was a different time. I just think the internet plays a huge part in it. I mean, I spoke to a young person who said to me, she learned how to self-harm, i.e. cutting, from watching a YouTube video about how not to self-harm. Yes. I just thought that was ironic. So
Bumble was also a place for that, for disordered eating, for how to starve yourself. Bumble, absolutely. Dangerous for children.
It is.
But most social media is.
That's what I'm saying. And that they have in abundance. That is what so many young people, not every, but it's, social media plays such a huge part in their lives. So,
Mm.
for example, I guess you can be exposed to something that you had no mind to be exposed to before.
Yeah.
And also just, I don't know, going back to something that Sarah said about, you know, wanting to hurt yourself or self-harm because of what somebody else said about you. But I guess if you know, I've spoken to people who say things like, you know, they'll there'll be like some sort of group chat where they'll rate who's the most popular.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't make that list, it can be soul destroying to these young people. You know, to you and I would laugh it. We don't care. But when you're, I don't know, 14, 15, I guess it means a lot. And that's why I say it's relative. To us, it just seems trivial. But I think to them, it's a really big deal. And we didn't have that. We did not grow up with social media. We were out playing, you know. I played until the street lights came on, and then I knew it was time to get home.
Yeah.
I had real friends, not online friends. I had, you know, people I could actually interact with. I just think it's a different time. And I think that we as parents perhaps haven't kind of kept up with it necessarily. I'd like to know how many parents actually actively look in their children's phone. What are they doing? Who are they talking to? You know, what group chats are they in? I think
they'll clear the chat anyway. If they think you're going to check, they'll clear the chat.
They clear it anyway. Exactly.
Yeah. So maybe that's the difference, Karen. Our generation did not have social media. So we weren't constantly bombarded with other people's experiences. We didn't have the comparison.
Yeah.
Especially physically. That this generation hasn't. And I wonder, has our parenting become too permissive? I remember when my daughter was in primary school and she was like, oh, my friends have a phone. They have an iPhone. Can I have a phone? I said, why? You're with me all the time, or you're with the child manager. What you need a phone for?
Who you calling?
Who you calling? But she was so upset and felt quite left out for not having a phone in primary school. But if all parents kind of recognize this is probably not a good idea for a very young child, then she wouldn't have that. You know, we're off the days where you burn off your finger to dial round and round and round.
I remember that.
And only one person could use the internet at a time. You know, so
I didn't have internet growing up.
No, I didn't in Jamaica, but I remember when we got the dial-up, and then if you're on, exactly. So you didn't have overexposure to anything,
but they do. They have, you know, these phones are on them all the time. You know, the children go to bed with their phones. They're on
That's awful, Cara. That is awful. You know what? I think that's why I'm very strong, as in when my daughter will have a phone. And I do know some kids her age already have a phone. And it's that, like Kay said, I mean, what do you need a phone for? You're year 5, you're at school. Like, who are you calling? There's no one you need to call. If they need to call me, then the teacher will call me. The reception will call me in the school. You're not going anywhere. You're not allowed a phone. And, you know, even if there was a way for her not to have a phone before she got to 16, I would do that, because I heard something somewhere on a podcast. They say, what age are you happy for your kids to have a phone? You're happy for your kids to have a phone when you're happy for them to watch porn on their own. That's the obvious thing. And that made me think, wow. But they have a point. You know? So you've got to be really careful. And there's no I just think it's disgusting going to bed with a phone when you're like 13. No way.
But what about children who, let's just say, for example, they are in year 7, right? They're at secondary school, and they're going to get the bus home. Do they not need a phone to say to their parents?
Yes, have a phone. But I'll be controlling what's on your phone.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that brings us to the next point. Then we have to control and monitor what our children are watching.
That's
and what I'm saying is, for a lot of parents, that can be quite a big job. You start off with the best one in the world, but actually that constant, and remember, my children are much smarter than me. I think I've put parental things on there. I guarantee they know.
They'll find a way around it.
I'm telling you. Mm-hmm. They know I'm a dinosaur. I ain't got a clue. I have to ask one to
There are
help
some
me.
apps, though, that aren't I mean, obviously your children are older now, Karen, but there's some apps that are not suitable. Like, I know, you know, some people in Naya's class that have got TikTok. I think that's massively inappropriate. There's no way in hell that a 9-year-old should have TikTok.
No.
That's not, no way.
or play GTA or Call of Duty or all the other games that children were allowed to play that, introduced huge adult concepts
Yep.
to them
Very true.
before. By year 6, I think the statistic when my daughter was leaving was that by year 6, almost every child in that year group would have seen porn or been exposed to pornography in year 6. And that would be because they're at school with children who are not monitored, whose parents are way too permissive, and they bring it into the playground. So,
absolutely. Yeah. I remember when my daughter was on a WhatsApp group chat and she'd come off of it the week before. She said people kept adding her. They were saying things that weren't nice and she came off of it. Kid you not, a week later, they were sending around dick pics, really inappropriate pictures. And all the children were called. I was horrified, but I was so grateful that she'd come off that. But she could have been in that group.
Yeah.
Did you remember the whole 2 girls in a cup or something like that?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh my God. So that's when my daughter was in year 6. And she's like, oh, the kids are talking about 2 girls in a cup. And I was scared to look it up because my mind went all sorts of places.
I don't even know about this.
But it was year 6. She was so innocent.
I feel like year 6 is where the innocence goes. After that, they see it all. That's it, done.
But it's scary, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is very scary. I think children are exposed to more things. I think that as parents, we really do need to be more. And I'm guilty because we do get busy. You're coming in from work, and I trust my children as well. I do trust them because you want to have an element of trust and say, look, I'm going to give you these apps. I trust you. And hope they don't betray that trust. But I think that's a minefield in itself. How much do you allow them to have? Do you allow them to have Snapchat? Half the children, I would say, have apps that are beyond their ages anyway. And things like Call of Duty, you might have an older brother who plays it. And lots of children I hear say, but my brother plays it. So it's not necessarily bought for them, but they're exposed to it because of an older sibling. I'll just quote a statistic. So it says here, 50% of mental health problems are established by the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. 10% of children and young people aged 5 to 16 have a clinically diagnosable mental health problem.
My God.
Is huge. And it says, yet 70% of children and adolescents who experience mental health problems have not had appropriate intervention at a sufficiently early age. That's quite scary. That's really hard.
Very, very scary. And is that in the UK or is that worldwide?
This is in the UK. This is the UK.
As you were reading those statistics, Karen, I just thought the difference with my generation as well, when we were growing up, our parents were always at home. You could never dream of having a key, even as an adult. Turnkey in whose house? So I never had opportunities to bring people back to the home. My mom wasn't always out working so that, I had to come in from school and had time alone. That wasn't a thing. Parents were always there. I think that made a big difference, quite frankly.
I think it makes a huge difference because you're right. I think children now have to be very independent. They've got time to go on their phones. They've got time to, hang out or do things that possibly they shouldn't be doing. But that's because I think this country, because cost of living is so much higher than other places, I think that parents have to leave the home to work. I think you've got more. So, for example, growing up, my mum worked part-time. My dad went out to work full-time, but my mum was pretty much there. I work full-time. And I work beyond my hours often, which, can't be very helpful for my daughter or for myself. So I just think, things have changed.
What a balance.
Yeah, exactly. And
do we live somewhere or...
do we have heating?
Exactly. It's quite you shouldn't have to choose. But you're right. Economically, most parents have to work.
Absolutely.
And so it gives a child maybe too much alone time. I don't know. But I just wanted to say, part of becoming an adolescent and separating from your parents and is that adolescence is a period that's characterized by grief and loss, because you're going to become disillusioned. You idealized parents, you realize they're not perfect, they're not saints, and you become aware of existential struggles, hence the self-harm and lots of talk about suicide, even as a joke. Oh, if I don't get this, I'm going to kill myself. Hear that all the time. Oh, if he breaks up with me, I'm going to kill myself. Even I had that directed to my son when girls liked him and he wasn't interested. They were like, well, I'm going to kill myself. And right or wrongly, I just goes, oh, off you pop then. There's not even any blood on my back garden or front garden.
You're all heart, Kay.
I am all heart. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing to say, because if I had even thought that as an adolescent, it wouldn't have come out my mouth, because the lick I would have get, but I want to kill myself over a boy. What?
Absolutely, right? And I'm right there with you. But if you think about it, I've heard adults, do really what I would consider to be quite crazy things because they've lost a loved one, a breakup or... So when you think about it, the adolescent brain is not fully developed yet. They're very emotional. There's a lot of hormones at play in this. And so it doesn't surprise me, it's awful, but it doesn't surprise me that people say these things.
Yeah. And they are learning to be resilient at the time.
They're learning.
But if there's no one there to guide them. So, Sarah, you were talking about girls who all their hopes and dreams are pinned onto a teenage adolescent boy.
Yes, yeah.
Who's also figuring things out. Let's face it. He's not a man. He's a boy. And he's also figuring stuff out. And, the pressure that's put on them to be a girl's everything at 14 and 15, it's wild. And, for me, that wasn't anybody else's job but mine to teach my daughter how to love herself, to build her self-esteem. So she knew that her value and her worth wasn't external. It didn't need to be validated by a boy.
Absolutely. And that's really important. That's a very important message.
How many parents are spending time with their daughters teaching them that their value is not about how they look, whether they have a thigh gap or, aesthetically, do they look like an Instagram model, but rather, what is the content of the inside? That's what I focused on. And my daughter was incredibly, much as she struggled with anxiety, interestingly, she had really, really good self-esteem, because I taught her that from very young, not to let anybody tell her what she was worth. Her worth was in being a human being on this planet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good message. What do you think attributed to her anxiety difficulties?
Hers was a situational one. So she had an experience under 5, which left her with huge anxiety. At the time, she didn't have language to articulate it. And over the years, the anxiety built and built and built and got worse. But it was very, very specific and very situational. Okay. And so therapy helped her to heal from that.
Okay. I think that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about, is that I think if you have a child who's experiencing anxiety due to trauma or anything else, and it goes untreated, because I think some people in some communities don't recognize mental health when they see it.
Yeah.
And it goes untreated, I think that can escalate. I think that can then cause problems later on.
I agree,
so Karen. I would really like to just help raise awareness. It, like I say, it doesn't mean that because somebody is anxious, because, for example, they're afraid to put their hand up in class because they don't want to get a question wrong. That is anxiety, yes, but that's probably healthy, normal anxiety. I'm talking about anxiety that is presenting in such a way that is stopping the young person from carrying out, living their lives healthily. That needs to be addressed. And it was just great that you recognized that your daughter needed support and help, and you got it.
I did.
And I do think that we need to do that. I mean, I still speak to parents now who say, don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Don't worry. You haven't got a problem. And maybe they do.
Yeah. And as parents, we must stop frightening our children and then wonder why they're anxious. Please. Stop being the source of their fear and anxiety. Because actually you pass it on. The child will learn that, This is how I deal with difficult situations. Children learn 93%, I think, is nonverbal. So it doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth at this point. If you're saying to the child, don't worry about it, you'll get over it. Or don't worry about what your friends think of you at school. It's not that simple.
It isn't.
It's
That's what I'm
just
saying.
not.
It's not that simple. Absolutely. And the other thing I find is some parents put a lot of academic pressures on their children.
Yeah.
Really, look, we all want our children to do well, okay? That's a given. We all want our children to do well. But what is your child's best? What is their best? Because are we saying that their best isn't good enough? What is their best? If I know my daughter's tried, she's revised, she's done her best, honestly, it has to be good enough.
Yeah.
And lots of us, I think, do pressure our children. I mean, I know children that are going to tuition 3-4 times a week. The expectation is that they'll get straight A's or 9s as they're now called. And if they don't, that, extra pressure. There are children who are doing so many chores at home. And I'm not saying your children shouldn't do chores. I think it's really important. They should be responsible, all those sorts of things. But lots of chores on top of schoolwork, on top of tuition, on top of church. There is a lot of that as well. There is a lot. I mean, and I just think sometimes we are not assisting our children with their mental health. We are not supporting that. And I think we need to step back and listen to our children. How many parents actually sit and talk to their children, have conversations with their children? And not about things that we want to talk about. You know what I mean? Like where we let the child lead the conversation, just listen. I've had to learn to do that.
Same. I've had to learn that too. I'm just going to read you a quote. This is one of the tasks of adolescence. And I think this is where many parents might trip up. During early and mid-adolescence, idealized images of parents must be reworked so that the adolescent is free to discover his or her own ideals, goals, standards, find love, and ultimately sexual gratification in the world of peers. I could not have even hinted that I had sexual feelings as a teen, because that was just not a part of my development. Or in Jamaica, it wasn't a thing. You are not allowed to have sexual feelings till you're married, quite frankly. That's how they like it. But you do have it from you're a teenager. And the pretense, who do you go to talk to about sexual feelings and discovering that you like boys or girls or that emergent sexuality? You can't talk about it.
That is very interesting. And I'll tell you why I say that. There is a huge disparity sometimes between the values of home and the values of school and elsewhere, right? So, for example, let's just say you've got a young person who is maybe 15, let's just say, who is exploring their sexuality and is feeling as if they are finding same-sex attractive. Mm-hmm. Now, that might be very, very difficult for this young person to divulge to their parents. Number one, the parents may have different views about that, right? Now, at school, everyone's celebrated. Everyone's allowed to be what they want to be. Everybody's allowed to, you can even change your name, actually.
Yeah.
In some schools, yeah. Now, at home, that may not be accepted. So where does this child go? Now, I have a particular view on this. I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard for us to say, as a parent, yes, you should allow your child to be really expressive and talk. Because for some people who are religious, and I know, Kay, that you will have your own views on this, but some people are Christian and they will have Christian values. Mm-hmm. And there will be that conflict. So what do they do? I know that we should be inclusive, but what if a parent believes, actually, number one, my child shouldn't really be engaging in any sort of sexual activity. Not that you can't feel it. You might feel those things because it's hormone related, but that they shouldn't act on it. As a parent, they have the right to have that as a family rule, don't they? To say,
of course, but that doesn't mean you don't talk about it. and say to your child, this is perfectly normal. Developmentally, your body's changing. You will have sexual feelings. But some in the Christian tradition will say to those children, well, you can't masturbate either. It's a sin. So you have absolutely no sexual release. You can't masturbate. You can't date. You can't kiss a boy or a girl. You can't do nothing. What are you supposed to do with your sexual feelings? How do you manage them? And I'm putting that back to you, Karen, because Christian or not, those sexual feelings will be there. How do you encourage your child to manage them and respect their bodies enough to not give it away? You know, so when my daughter was at that stage of development, I would say to her, look, legally, you can have sex at 16, but emotionally, I don't think you're ready. Emotionally, the development doesn't catch up. She always used to joke and say, what kind of God would give us breasts before our brains developed? Because now you're raging with hormones and your body feels ready for sex, but emotionally you're not. And it's a line parents have to straddle with real sensitivity, I would say. But don't forget their bodies are ready. Even if you know they're not ready and their minds are not. But to say to them you can't have those feelings, that's why so many will go behind their backs and experiment anyway. Teen pregnancies. Because nobody told them about contraceptive and safe sex.
I don't know, though. I don't think that's the only reason why children or young people experiment. I would imagine some of it is to do with a feeling, but I think some of it is not to do with necessarily the feeling. I think people would experiment because there's peer pressure.
Yeah.
I think that there is also wanting to fit in and do what other people are doing. I think that there's that sort of rebelliousness. I think that there's sort of exploration as well. They want to explore. But I wouldn't say it was all to do with these raging hormones that made you really, really horny and you just wanted, to try something. I don't think so. I think there's lots of different reasons why, I would say. And I think that every young person is different. I think you'll find some young people will experience those sexual urges at different times, because not every 15-year-old is gonna feel that. I mean, there are some people that would start a period until they're 15, 16, right? That happens.
Yeah.
So I think it depends. But what you did say that I totally agree with is conversation. I think it's really important to have open dialogue. Some people find that much more difficult than others. The three of us work with young people. That's what we do all day long.
Yeah.
So we are, we're used to it. We are, familiar with having these types of conversations. But for a lot of people, it will be really hard and really uncomfortable. And it will conflict with what they believe sometimes. So it's hard. But I'm hoping that this conversation will help sort of generate other people's conversations.
Sarah, I know you were having some technical difficulties. I hope you're back. But what are your views on equipping your child with knowledge about their bodies, the changes they go through, sexual behavior versus nothing, and they need to wait until they're adults?
Yeah, that's an interesting one for me. I mean, when it comes to educating my daughter, I mean, she's now learning at school about babies, where babies come from. And she did actually say to me the other day, she said, Mum, when I go back to school next term, she said, we're going to be learning about sex. I thought, okay. From out of a 9-year-old is a bit shocking, but so now her homework one of her homework this weekend, one of the science bit was about conception and stuff. And so I think kind of as part of the scientific stuff, I'm embracing this time to talk to her about her body. So I think I've always talked to her about, like you said earlier, Kay, I've always talked to her about being beautiful on the inside. I know it sounds cliche, but I do tell her she's beautiful, but I do very much focus on the inside, like you said with your daughter, Kay.
Yeah.
What makes people beautiful on the inside. And just having really open dialogue, I think. I don't feel you can tell somebody you must not have sex, when they're 16. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, No one, no one even told me anything. Nothing, not a thing.
Right.
And I was very immature. When I first was sexually active, way, way too immature. I don't know what the hell I was even doing. But I think had I been 16 plus, that I don't know. I wanted to. Like there was no one going to stop me. That's what I wanted to do. There is nobody on this earth who could have stopped me doing what I wanted to do. So I don't believe you can stop kids.
Right.
But I think it's about education. Really about, like you said, Kay, what's normal? What's normal? It's okay to feel this way. This is normal. And, just to have support. Because I think one of the main thing I had no one to go to, no one to tell me, no one to help me, no one to tell me yes or no. I never had that. I never had my parents didn't ever talk to me about what was okay. I never had a conversation about sex, nothing.
All right.
So found out the way I found out about sex was because me and my girlfriends had a good old chat about it, and I found out through trial and error. Boys, I'm afraid. That's not what I want for my daughter. I do not. But then again, I also appreciate, why would my daughter really, age 16, want to come to me and say, let me talk to you about sex, mum? Maybe when she's older, but not 16. It's so I don't know. I think I'd have found that, I don't know. I would have found that very embarrassing to talk to my mum at 16 about sex. So everyone's different. Yeah.
I'm in agreement with you, Sarah. I think I would probably talk to my daughter about relationships. That's probably the way in, because actually sex is the act, isn't it? That's quite separate to healthy relationships and how she'd want to be treated, all those sorts of things. They're the type of conversation I'd be having at 16, not the act. You learn about that in
right,
biology.
Karen. I never had any of that. None of that. I had no relationship chat, nothing.
I think that would be more healthy. That's really the way that I've approached that subject with my children. We've talked about relationships and how they want to be treated, those sorts of things. Would I want to talk to my 16-year-old about the act of sex? No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
Would you talk to her about contraceptive, STDs, sexual health?
I would like my daughter to not necessarily engage in that. Unless she came home and said to me, there's a boy that she's known and say he came round and they were friends for a long time. I would hope that she wouldn't engage in the act of sex at 16. I know it's legal, but like someone said earlier, whether she would be emotionally ready for that.
Yeah.
For adults who are not emotionally ready for it.
Exactly. I think 18 should be the legal limit.
I think so.
I think 16 is too young.
I think 16 is really young. I think, oh my goodness, I mean, my parents said I couldn't have a boyfriend until I was 18.
Right.
And I waited.
I can't believe it, Karen. I was never told any of that. And if they said it, I'd have been like, shove it. I'm doing it at 14.
You're doing it anyway, Sarah.
You have to anyway. There's none of that.
But
I couldn't have one till I left university.
Wow. But my body told me first. Like you said, my body was ready, but my mind was not ready. But I just continued onwards.
I think, but then that's, like you say, it's to do with our parenting and how we're parented and our relationship with our parents and all those,
But it wasn't just that though, Karen. It's like my body was ready. The hormones are ready. There's you couldn't stop that. The charge was too strong. There's nothing could have stopped me.
Well, I don't know. I think I suppressed mine.
I couldn't. No, I didn't suppress. I didn't suppress nothing ever, and that's what I love. How can you? That's not healthy in a way. I think suppressing it when you're 16 plus.
I knew I was too young. I knew I wasn't ready mentally. I knew I wasn't.
Okay.
So
but I'm with Sarah there because my body was ready. And my struggle wasn't so much sex with another person because I was terrified of getting pregnant. And my mom was always like, wherever you catch your cold, blow your nose, which means if you get pregnant, go there and have the baby. But I was told you can't masturbate. What?
Who told you that? Who said that?
Church. It's a sin.
Okay, did they?
It's a sin. And if you think, because of what you're thinking about when you're masturbating, that's what makes it sinful.
Oh, right.
Because you'll be thinking about sex.
That's lust, is it? Lust.
That's lust, and you're giving in to lust. Well, I did give in because, hello, no, you can't say I can't self-pleasure. That's nuts. pun. But a lot of children would have grown up with that. And you know who I feel sorry for? Children who experience sexual abuse, whether it's by family members or strangers who have been sexualized too young,
Yep.
who then hear these messages. Don't have sex. Well, they're a child. They weren't given a choice. Someone is raping them, but don't have sex. And this happens in the church too.
Oh,
but
massively.
Kate, that is a completely separate thing. The fact is they have been violated. They have been experienced trauma. They need help anyway. This is not.
But what I'm saying is, these girls, I grew up in church, but I'm saying I've seen it with my two eyes. They were vilified when they became sexually active too young. They were called loose and all of that. And if they became pregnant, they were ostracized and they were completely blamed as if they were alone in their early sexualization. While the man or the father of they may well know who's abusing that child, but they're still telling the girl about purity culture, which is sick.
Yeah, that's awful. That is, yeah, that is awful. That is awful. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think, like I say, I think 16 is too young.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think 18, if my daughter came home with a boyfriend at 18, I'm more than happy, sit around and have it. To be fair, before that, but I would just like to think that they were not going to be active before 18. I just think it's a huge responsibility. I think it's so emotional. It is so, it's hugely emotional, isn't it? I think the act of it. And I think, women tend to be, I'm not saying, in every case, but we do tend to be more emotional. And therefore, I think it's a huge responsibility for us. And to keep yourself healthy, to make sure that, he's healthy, you're keeping yourself healthy. It's just a lot.
I think also, I have to say, when it comes to sex education in school, my sex education class was so crap because the teacher was embarrassed. That's another thing. The teacher was embarrassed to talk about it. And they were kind of trying to get people to put a condom banana. And, no one really gave a crap. And then that was that. Then we just learnt, on boys. I know that sounds awful, but there was who was to teach. No one was teaching us because the teacher was too embarrassed to talk about it. And that's another thing. I think we're going to have sex education in school. Whoever's delivering it needs to seriously deliver it properly in a way that they're not embarrassed. If they're the kind of person that gets embarrassed talking about sex and masturbation, then they shouldn't be delivering that class.
I agree.
My thoughts.
But, Sarah, for me, it was my job to teach my children, not school. So they had the age-appropriate one at year 6, and then another one in secondary school. I was the one who taught them about STDs, sexual health, safe sex, emotionally, physically, and all of that. I did that. That's my job. I'm the parent. Why should I let the school teach that?
Oh, the school, just rubbish. Absolute rubbish. I think back in the day, I feel like now, yes, I would tell my daughter, but I just think back in 1985 or something, people weren't so I think they relied on the school. I don't know. My parents, I'm not sure if they were embarrassed. I think they were, or I don't know. They just never, ever said anything about it. So, and then they did, but at the same time, they weren't fussed if I was having sex when I'm 14.
I think mine would have murdered me, quite frankly.
I just said, this is what I'm up to. I brought a boy home. Yeah. Bad, isn't it?
I would have been deceased.
The guest room.
Oh my God.
The guest room. And I was allowed to. Him to stay over, listeners. How bad is that? Yeah.
The funny thing is that not that my parents would have killed me, they probably would have, but no, that wasn't it for me. It was the disappointment that my parents would be so disappointed, and I wanted, their approval. I wanted to be.
I wasn't fussed about that so much.
A good kid, yeah. It mattered to me, and I think my children, especially my eldest, I would say, is quite similar in that she would like me to be proud of her. I am anyway, but I think that deters her from doing anything that she thinks I wouldn't approve of.
Really? I think I wanted them to be proud of me. At the same time, I got raging hormones and I like boys. That's it.
Yeah.
That outweighs them being proud of me. I personally rather be with the boys.
I
I'm
I
wondering
just
if this
did.
is cultural because
It's cultural.
That's true.
even
Yeah,
now,
true. Very true.
even now at 23 and 19, nearly, my children know the house I'm in is not the house you're having sex in. No, no, I don't want. No, no. If I'm not in the house and you sneak about, fair, I'm not there. But like to say, come over, I'm here downstairs and they're upstairs with the locked door. No, sir. No,
Oh,
I was
sir.
that.
absolutely.
I was literally in the guest room. I remember that first time I wrote my diary, I lost my virginity.
Yeah.
And I was in the guest room. I came out with my boyfriend, and my mum and dad were
Uh-huh.
up on the roof. My dad was fixing the roof or something, and they came out in the garden, and they were just laughing, giggling and laughing. And I was laughing, and he didn't know where to look.
Oh my
But
gosh.
looking back at it now, that's really not acceptable, is it?
You'll be doing that with your daughter, won't you?
No way in living hell will that happen to my daughter.
I'd like to hear from our listeners, right? Is this cultural? Because I think it is, just to an
I
extent.
think it's cultural.
I think it's cultural. I think
it is. Yeah, you're right.
for lots of families growing up the way that I did, parents from the Caribbean, etc., African countries, I think that would just not have been accepted. You know?
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it.
So
100%. And I'll be protecting my daughter because no way in hell that I would be okay for her to be bringing around a boy at 14. No way in staying over for the night in the guest. No way.
Right.
That would never. This wouldn't ever happen. So yeah.
Yeah.
Don't
We
want that
change. So ladies, any final words before we wrap up?
yeah, so I would just like to say, if there are parents out there struggling with their teenagers, be it difficulty with anxiety, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, etc., or if you'd like to talk to us about healthy use of the internet, social media, etc., please do contact us. In a moment, one of my co-hosts will give us the details of that.
No, Karen, it's you. It's all down
It's
to
you,
you.
Karen. It's you.
Karen.
It's time. It's you.
I think I've got some sort of aversion to it. I don't know. Anyway,
That's why it's got to be you.
But yes, if anyone would like to get in touch, I would really like to hear from our listeners about this because it's a topic very, very dear to my heart. And I hope that it will help some people have a conversation with their young people about sex, the internet, and anything else that we've discussed. I would like to help sort of address, stigma attached to those topics. So yes, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes.
Anything else, ladies?
No. Yes. Final thought is adolescence is a really difficult time. So do spend time with your teenager. They're also finding it difficult. Lots of body changes, lots of peer and social changes. They need you at this stage, maybe a lot more than you think. So talk. That's my final word.
Yeah, mine too. Just talk to your teenagers and just let them know. I was saying to a family the other day, even if your son doesn't want to talk to you, just let him know that you're always there for him, whether he's crying, angry, confused, overwhelmed, all those, as we say in our therapy jobs, all emotions are welcome, all different sides of your welcome. Well, I think our teenagers need to know that. Especially, people that struggle with expressing themselves. So, yeah, I would say keep those conversations open, even if your teenagers don't want to talk to you, that they've heard you and that they know you're there for them. That's what's important. So when the crap does hit the fan, they know they can come to you. That's worth its weight in gold. Trust me on that one, it is.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I do agree.
So Karen, over to you.
Right. So you can contact us by email, right? So it's beautifullymelanatedpodcast@gmail.com.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And the Instagram?
And
You're on a
Instagram?
roll?
I don't know. Instagram, is it the same?
It's at Beautifully Melanated Podcast.
Oh, that was simple.
That was very simple.
That was very simple. And we've even got a YouTube channel, haven't we?
We do.
Same name.
It's in need of updating, but it's the same name.
There you go. See?
is hilarious. Oh, thank you for listening. See you next time.
All right.
Any
see you
reader
next
letter
time.
you're happy for us to read out on the podcast, let us know.
All right. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
We are beautifully